I'm seen as a perfect horror by quite a lot of people, mainly farmers and terrible gubbinses like some of the more dreadfully environmentally dead small councillors. Know what I mean? Oh, that's Lady Sarah again, you know. In fact, of course, I'm the patron of the Dartmoor Preservation Association. Personally, of course, I can't help feeling this love for the moor, and that one has got to fight for its beauty and its character for as long as possible. What it provides is everything to people who want freedom and solitude, very rare now, and challenge and inspiration. And it is, of course, a place of magic to many people. And it is something that, in a country which is rapidly losing all its magic and challenge and solitude, is something we've got to defend. It's very, very important. Agriculture on Dartmoor is what I would call a threat, but a lessening threat, because inevitably there are going to be fewer grants and subsidies tempting landowners and farmers to increase their amount of fencing and what they call improvement of the wild moor. And that, in my view, is a great gain. Now, what you see is the great ridge of Hamilton, which was, in my memory, heather from end to end. But unfortunately, what's happened, the two lines of trees embrace an area which has been, quote, improved, end quotes, to add to the beef and sheep mountains. Successive owners, and I've known 5 different ones, have thought that that great hill and all its heather and openness is a challenge which they're going to accept. They're going to tame it for cash. And so they have successively improved it. I don't think that those green patches and that ploughland is at all beautiful when you think of what has been lost and the freedom of the whole, that part of the ridge destroyed. That to me is a great loss. It's a loss to the national park, and I wish it had not been allowed to happen. I think it's a sad story, but it's repeated, you know, pretty well over the whole of Dartmoor. There's this improvement going on, and I can't wait for the European Council's grants and subsidies to come to an end to prevent exploitation, which is totally unnecessary. As to the future, well, knowing the moor so well and the changes, many of them disastrous, that have happened to it, I feel a sad feeling that we may lose the Dartmoor that we know. It will be something quite different, and its magic will have gone. I honestly feel that I have seen a process of attrition going on, which, if it goes on for another 20 years, may mean that Dartmoor becomes a little more than a kind of rather battered car park with a sort of Hampstead Heath spaces in between. And that's why it's so enormously important for those who are literally in charge of the moor from the planning point of view, and for people who love it, all to fight as hard as they can against all the elements and the very powerful influences which will otherwise destroy it.
The spring moor is alive with young animals, but death is in close attendance, and some parts virtually become graveyards for livestock. The current policy of animal husbandry and subsidies is open to serious question. Why in certain places so much neglect, so much overstocking? If things are bad for the sheep, they can be even worse for the Dartmoor ponies.
Well, the Horses and Ponies Protection Association was in fact formed about 50 years ago, but within the last 5 years or so, the association has got increasingly concerned about the number of ponies that have been neglected on Dartmoor. Mainly, it's horses being neglected to the point of starvation, that their owners are just turning them out on the moor and not bothering to feed them when the weather is bad. I don't think it's the majority. There are many farmers that are good farmers and care about their animals, but the few are really giving Dartmoor a bad name. There seem to be certain bad areas that you go to and you find poor yearlings or mares that are trying to foal that are collapsed and they can't get to their feet because their hind legs are too weak. And there they sit until they die. Well, I'm particularly worried about this little pony because although she's got a ragged, thick coat on her, underneath that coat, she's very thin indeed. Now, I'm having a job to identify her owner because she isn't clearly branded and I can't see any ear markings. I think she's almost got to the point when she's not interested in eating. And she's obviously searching for grass, and we've got a very late spring this year. If the grass doesn't come soon, the next stage is that her hind legs will give out. She won't be able to stand, she'll collapse, and then she'll die where she's sitting. She's got to this stage because she hasn't been looked at during the winter. She hasn't been given sufficient hay, well, any hay at all, I would imagine. She's relying on her own bodily reserves, and she's got to the point when she's got nothing left. And so her muscles are wasting, and she'll get stiff in her hind legs until she collapses. It really boils down to just a matter of bad husbandry, bad stockmanship. Why they don't bother, well, I'm not really the one to answer that. It really should be the farmers. I can only say that the value of the ponies on the moor is very small. And I would imagine that the farmers themselves feel that if they have to put too much effort into looking after them and feeding them, then they don't become an economic proposition.
While the onslaught of the weather and humanity's retreat from its responsibilities produce their sad results, the great festival of life continues, despite everything.
Jump!
The name of the dog is Chum. I've been training him for about 8 months. He's 18 months old. I don't start my dogs too young. I encourage them to work when they're ready to work, but I don't put no pressure on them to about 12 months old. I have tried it before, and I don't know if it's my temperament or what, but I seem to get them so methodical that they're doing it because I'm telling them to. They lose a little bit interest. So I'd rather let them get a little bit of age there. So they've got a little bit more confidence in themselves, and we seem to get along a lot sweeter that way than trying to rush them at a too early stage. I enjoy this part more than going out on the dog trial field and competing. My enjoyment is training and trying to get young dogs right to go onto a trial field, because what's put into him now will be there for the rest of his life. And I think that's a lot more challenge and a lot more rewarding than walking out with him to a stake at a dog trial field. But it's nice to know that you've got a dog good enough, what you trained yourself to get to that point as well. So, but mainly the satisfaction of seeing, well, a young dog coming out and not causing mayhem out when you start to train him, but knowing nothing and bringing him through gradually. This dog isn't finished yet, but he's on his way.
Well, today we've come up to the River Swincombe, high up on Dartmoor, to carry out a population survey of the salmon and the trout in the river. We use electrical fishing equipment. This is a generator that puts an electric current into the water that temporarily stuns the fish. If there is a problem, we'll start looking to see why the population is not what it should be. The draining of forestries creates a silt problem. The silt washes into the river and silts up the spawning beds, thus preventing the salmon from spawning. It could be the application of fertilisers, artificial fertilisers, which actively encourage weed growth. The weed will grow over the spawning bed. this is the natural spawning area of the fish. It comes all the way in from the sea and travels up onto the moors to spawn. And if it can't spawn, it can't reproduce, then it's going to affect the numbers of salmon that come into the river.
Brown trout. 176.
So even on Dartmoor, in a beautiful area like this, man can seriously affect the productivity of the salmon and affect the future of the species as a whole.
Barn owls have declined by about 90% over the last 30 years. And on Dartmoor, there are very, very few barn owls left. Certainly in the lowland valleys on the edge of the moor, there always were barn owls. And these have disappeared from a lot of sites, probably due to more intensive grazing. On Dartmoor, the grass is very short, and the small mammal population will have decreased, and small mammals form the bulk of the diet of the barn owl. The danger is that this very small and thinly scattered population that is left will dwindle into isolated pockets which will inbreed, and all it may take is one heavy winter with, 4 foot of snow, and that'll be it. No more barn owls. Barn owls that come in from the wild which can't be re-released, injured birds, can be used for breeding, and their offspring can be released into the wild because they're perfectly fit and healthy. And we employ a long-term release technique which involves putting pairs of barn owls into barns and keeping them there for at least 6 months, letting them breed in the barn, and then opening up the barn and letting the parent owls come and go and hopefully start to find their own food and gradually become truly wild barn owls. This scheme alone won't save the barn owl from extinction. This is just, to give us time to get it together, to get the habitat right. Because if the habitat isn't there, you're lost.
Human interest should be encouraged to develop organically within the limitations of the national park. Or 20 centuries of growth in a state of history will accelerate to a rapid retreat from all the wisdom of the past. On Dartmoor, Richard Jefferies' words, "Where man goes, nature ends," mustn't become prophetic.